Chapter 3, The Jump Off. I experienced my first celebrity encounter up close in DC. I dated a professional athlete named Brian Fisher, not his real name. Brian was the star of the Washington Redskins. I never followed football, so while I knew he was famous, I had no idea what he did on the field. I had never seen him play, but everybody else seemed to know him well, so it looked good for me to be seen with him. I was in my early 20s and on the rise, and he was a star. He picked me up at my apartment. He took me to dinner at Tacoma Station. He had a chocolatey complexion, a great body, and was very handsome. We didn't get into any deep conversation over dinner. I just loved being out with him. I loved being seen with him. After the date, he dropped me off. I was looking forward to the next date. The next day, it was all over the station that I went out with Brian. Neville pulled me aside and said, "You do know he's married with a lot of kids, don't you?" I didn't. I had no idea that not only did he have children with his wife, but also with several other women. So, despite attention and star treatment, that was our first and last date. I couldn't see myself being anyone's mistress. I thought I deserved better than that. And thank God we never had sex. My disappointment didn't last long because the next week I found myself being wooed by another attractive, prominent man, a budding R&B singer. Even though we were an oldie station, we managed to play about 3 current songs an hour on my show, and one of them was from this artist who had a hit record at the time. He had a smooth, smoky voice and was quite attractive, about 6'4", light skinned, and curly hair, which was in back in the 80s. He came to DC on a promotional tour for his album, and at the time, I wasn't into gossip, or else I would have gotten the lowdown on this singer. Unbeknownst to me, he had just been released from jail. I don't know what he went to jail for, but it was common knowledge to everyone in the biz except for me that he had been locked up. Industry people weren't really talking to me like that then. I was an AM oldies jock who didn't really count. I was playing contemporary music on occasion, but it didn't count as far as being in the know. I wasn't Donnie Simpson, who back then wasn't talking to me either. I'm sure he didn't know I existed, and I was too scared to talk to him. There were other big jocks in town with big reps. Famous and popular acts came to our station more as a favor to Kathy Hughes than for any kind of career boost for me and my show. We were by no means on the radar as a player in the business. So it was exciting to have someone really popular come through. This R&B singer stopped by and I interviewed him for my show. He had a top 10 single, a beautiful song. P.S. We haven't heard from him since. He was a one-hit wonder. He was handsome and he was flirting hard with me. During this time, I was on a cocaine diet that had me really slim. You know, I had been struggling with weight since I can remember, since my mother put me on a diet in the first grade. But cocaine made my weight a non issue, and I very much liked that. I had dropped almost 50 pounds in no time at all. It was dramatic. Thank God I didn't have friends coming back and forth to DC who could say, "I was just here last week and you look like you dropped about 10 pounds. What's happening with you?" I started out in DC about a size 16, but within about 2 months, I was down to a size 6. My shift was from 3 in the afternoon until 7. I would do cocaine after the shift practically all night and sleep until 2 in the afternoon. When I woke up, I had to get ready to start my shift again. The only time I would eat was when I was doing cocaine, which was becoming less and less frequent, and I was getting skinnier and skinnier. I didn't think that I looked good, but I was the size I always thought I wanted to be. I was finally supermodel skinny, which meant to me that it was just a matter of time before I landed that job in New York or that man who had some money. Nothing could stop me. I was just cute enough to get into all the right circles, whether it was a politician or behind the scenes guy in entertainment or an entertainer himself. I was that hot. Hell, Jody Watley came to the oldie station and was looking at me like, "Bitch?" And I'm thinking, "You're Jody Watley giving me the look?" Wow. She was actually threatened by me. I looked at that as a complete compliment. I didn't flaunt it like I was the it girl, but in my mind I was thinking, there's something to be said of this. So while I'm interviewing this R&B singer, I am not surprised that he was flirting with me the way he was. I was doing the basic radio interview, throwing soft questions like, "So, what's your new album about?" And instead of answering my question, he said, "Nobody told me that in this little AM station sitting on the corner of 4th and H in DC, I was going to find such a diamond in the rough." "Oh, thank you," I squealed. "Okay, now back to you." "No, back to you," he said. "So, how old are you?" "Well, I just graduated from college." I told him, thinking this was a big deal back then. In my industry, it was a big deal. Now it's not a part of my resume, it's just a sidebar. But back then, I was only too proud to say, "Yes, I graduated from college and I'm single." "You're single?" "Yes," I said. It went back and forth, and I liked it. I liked him too. But I wasn't strong enough at that point to say to him, "Let's go out." Nor was I strong enough or bold enough in my cocaine habit to show him my package and divulge what I was really up to. He finally asked me to go out with him when we went off the air, and I said, "Sure." He had a limo waiting for me when I ended my shift. We went out to dinner. After dinner, we were supposed to go to one of these glamorous industry parties in DC. He told me that he needed to stop off at his hotel to change his clothes, and he invited me up. I'm not thinking anything but that he was going to change his clothes, and he wanted me to wait for him upstairs. I was thinking, I'm about to go through the lobby of this swanky hotel with this hunky singer, and look at me. And while I was not a radio star, his name could land us in the society pages the next day. I figured that I was moving up one way or another. I was so naive at this point, so naive. I was thinking guys date girls like me for the purpose of marriage. I'm a nice girl from a two-parent household in New Jersey. I'm a college graduate with no children. I figured they save all that dog stuff, all that hoochie stuff for the hoochies. That is why I always kept my habit to myself, because nice girls don't do cocaine. I knew aesthetically I was still a nice girl. I just had this secret habit. I was a nice girl with a college background, a college graduation car, a mommy and a daddy, and a room waiting for me in our modest home in rural suburban New Jersey. I spoke nicely and I carried myself well, like a real high society woman. Shit, I even went to charm school. I knew which fork to use and had impeccable table manners. I'm the girl you can bring home to your mother. I'm thinking, now I'm walking through the lobby because he wants to show what a nice girl he's dating. And it doesn't hurt my career to be seen with him either. We get up to the room and he starts changing his clothes. He starts taking off his pants right there. And at first, I'm very uptight and nervous. But I said to myself, "Wendy, welcome to entertainment. You need to loosen the fuck up." But inside, I'm screaming, "Oh my God, celebrity penis." After he took his pants off, he approached me as I was sitting on his bed and he forced himself on me. He didn't wear a condom and I didn't scratch and fight. But it was clear that I was not an active participant. I was date raped. After he was finished, I left. We never made it to that party. This man said nothing to me, and I said nothing to him. I just got up and left. There were no tears. I didn't call anyone. I didn't run downstairs crying through the lobby disheveled. I simply left. I was so out of it, I didn't even know how I got home. I think I had a few dollars in my pocketbook, and I must have taken a cab home. I got home and I soaked the washcloth in alcohol and bathed my privates. I douched with vinegar, hoping to douche everything away. I know I was raped, but I don't compare it to the kinds of rape women experience around the world. I wasn't brutalized in an alley. My clothes weren't torn. What happened to me was classic date rape. I knew my attacker. Fortunately, I didn't know him well, where he could hurt me deeply emotionally, too. He wasn't a friend of 3 years who all of a sudden turned on me like a wild dog. He was somebody involved in an industry where that kind of behavior is more predictable, as I've learned through the years. I went for an AIDS test for approximately 4 months steadily afterwards. This was within my first 2 months of living in DC, and it was at the height of the AIDS scare. The word back then was that it had a 10-year incubation period, so I marked that date on my calendar. I was scared to death. To this day, I never found out if this was the singer's MO, to rape unsuspecting young girls. and I never shared the experience with anyone. I was too embarrassed. I thought people might have said that I asked for it. What was I doing in his hotel room? And checking my background more? Oh, yeah. And you're a cokehead. Yes, a naive cokehead, but a cokehead all the same. So I couldn't tell anyone. I didn't even share it with the woman at the clinic where I went for my AIDS test and a pregnancy test. The clinic was all I could afford on $9,000 a year, and I went there every month religiously after the rape. Pregnancy, I didn't trust the drugstore. I wanted a professional test. I had insurance, but was too scared that everything would be traced back to my job. I wanted to take the test because I wanted to know what my next move would be. If I was pregnant, I needed to make plans, and if I had AIDS, I needed to make plans. I would be done with the radio career. I would move back to Jersey because I would have wanted to be protected from the devastation mentally, first of all, that having AIDS would have done to me. And physically, the ravages that you saw within the earlier pictures of AIDS made me know I needed to be around people who loved me. And I was still under the age of 25 and technically speaking, still under my parents' insurance, tax paying and all. I knew I could go home to my parents. I would never have told them exactly how I contracted the disease. I would not have told them I had gotten it from being raped. I had a story all ready for them, just in case. One thing that everybody knew is that you didn't have to keep fucking to get AIDS. And I'm in the crazy entertainment business. Heck, it would have been easy to explain that I got with one of these dirty industry motherfuckers and caught the virus. I would have just quit the business and gotten a quiet, low-key job in Monmouth County. I would have lived in my bedroom at my parents' and just waited for the sickness to blow up. I would have at least had proper insurance coverage and someone to confide in as I was going through it. It wouldn't have been friends. And as far as relationships, I already lived the life of celibacy, so it would not have been difficult to keep that up. When I was in the Virgin Islands, I became the master of self pleasure. That worked very well for me. After I left the clinic the day after the rape, I stopped off at my connection's place and picked up a package. And after snorting cocaine for most of the afternoon, I finally picked up the phone and called my father. I was in a coke stupor, which sometimes makes you very talkative. I rambled on about how I loved him and mommy and how entertainment is really something else. I asked him how they were doing, and I started crying. I think that while my father had no idea why I was really calling, he got this much out of the conversation. This is my baby girl and she misses home very much and is feeling lonely. I couldn't tell him that it was only part of the truth. It wasn't unusual for me to call on a Saturday night. They would never think, why isn't she out? Something must be wrong. Because they knew I hardly ever went out. I've always been a sort of solitary person who didn't hang out much in the streets. When I went to work the next Monday, Neville, who was also one of my party buddies, asked, "How was your date with Mr. X?" "You know that nigga's nasty." "Yeah, he just got out of jail." "Girl, you were in way over your head." And I thought, why the hell didn't you tell me this shit before I went out with him? And I also thought, damn, jail? And all these images ran through my head. You know what goes on in jail. You watched Oz. I became really paranoid. Then I started rationalizing. Well, he's too big, so I know he wasn't taking it. He had to be giving it. But then I thought, but he's a real pretty motherfucker. I was just a mess. Eventually, I stopped taking the AIDS test. Along the way, I got false information and found out that taking the test every month was futile. The disease can live dormant in your system anywhere from 3 to 10 years. So I said to myself, fuck it. If I got it, I got it. I can't live being afraid. But what this did was make me even more isolated, and it drove me even deeper into my cocaine world. I started partying even harder, me and the white lady cocaine. There were plenty of industry parties in DC, the chocolate city. And all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I was actually becoming a fixture at these parties. Yes, I was at the industry parties, which I was able to attend because my program director was young and also trying to be known in the business. and he dragged me along with him. We all aspired to be part of FM radio. Being at these parties gave us a taste of that life. Soon, I started to be noticed, not because I worked at an oldie station, AM at that, but because I was this cute girl at the parties. My looks were starting to get me invited to parties without people knowing who I was. It was at one of these parties where I met my cocaine connection via somebody who I had met in DC. During this time in DC, I was copping off the block or taking one-on-ones from party people. But once I met my connection, I was then able to stop having to ask, can I get in on your package? Because I knew I liked it enough to get my own. My connection and I got along right from the start in that very feminine way. How you doing? He seemed like a regular guy. He had salt and pepper hair. He spoke correct English and was very non-threatening. He wasn't sexually threatening to me, and I wasn't legally threatening to him. Once we were comfortable with each other, he gave me his address, and I would go by his house several times a week and sniff cocaine from the house chair, a lazy boy. After I had snorted to my heart's content, I would purchase my package and leave. I would do from the house chair some nights for 4 hours. Sure. I would always pick up my package and go about my business. At that point, there was no paranoia. I would pick up my 1 gram about every other day or 3 times a week and be on my way. I wasn't worried then about being spotted or seen. Remember, I wasn't famous and I wasn't really thinking about who knew me. And while I was doing my thing at my connection's house, sitting in his lazy boy, the doorbell was ringing and people were coming and going. They may have given me a what's up before they took a few lines from the house tray too, while sitting on the couch next to the lazy boy, which I monopolized. Then they would get their shit and be on their way like it was no big deal. His clientele had just as much to lose at that point as I did. They weren't entertainment folks. They were engineers, school teachers, white collar workers. This was not a scene from the corner or anything. It was like hanging out at a friend's house and there just happened to be cocaine on the living room table. My dealer wasn't a thug or a gangster. He was a sophisticated, effeminate man with a nice apartment that he owned, with nice furniture, a designer mirror, for cocaine, of course, and everything laid out for his respectable clientele. Hanging at Andre's, not his real name, house was socializing, but it was socializing with the underworld. Everybody had above board jobs, but nobody talked about their jobs while they were there. If there was a teacher, I didn't know where the teacher taught. People kept their private lives private. No one knew who was married or who had children or who drove what car. We weren't there really to socialize. We were all there for one purpose, to get high. My dealer, sophisticated supplier, dealer, doesn't dealer sound so dirty? He had the kind of clientele that made me very comfortable. This wasn't a gossipy cipher. Andre and I would talk, but it wasn't gossip. And it was nice to know that I was doing my thing alongside doctors, lawyers, teachers, and everyday regular Joes. Once I had my dealer, I stopped going to industry parties. I did 2 things: stayed home doing cocaine and worked. In addition to being my dealer, Andre was a friend. He probably would not have been a friend if I wasn't doing coke, but I was, and birds of a feather tend to flock together. I invited him to go to my first radio convention in 1987. He drove with me from DC to Atlantic City to Impact, a music radio convention. I met cool DJ Red Alert within my first few minutes of arriving. He was on an escalator going up. I was going down. I said, "Hi, DJ Red Alert." And he said, "Ella Poo Poo." That was his signature saying. I was so excited. I was with Andre, and needless to say, I was fucked up. I brought him because he was somebody who knew the other side of me and also knew I was involved in radio. He accepted me. He was like my security blanket. I had never been to a convention, and I could have someone to break the ice with me. And if I couldn't break the ice, at least I'd have someone with whom I could sit in the corner and talk about people. While walking through the convention, I ran into another famous New York radio DJ, not a personality, but a person who actually spins records. We spoke. He was very nice. He happened to be hanging out with a very famous rapper at the time. Andre knew that both of these guys did coke heavily because he knew their DC supplier when they came to town on tours. Andre starts in with the subtle drug talk, and then the next thing you know, all four of us are in a hotel suite getting skied out of our minds. The rapper was the first person I ever met who exemplified extreme paranoia due to cocaine abuse. I never met anyone who opened up closets, looked under beds, flipped the blinds. We couldn't order anything from room service because he was afraid that any knock on the door would be the cops. The rapper's behavior was really bizarre. Even being fucked up, I recognized that he was acting strange. I had not reached the point in my addiction to even understand paranoia, but I would. Cocaine was all fun to me, and I was having loads of fun. I missed the whole convention because we met them practically when we got there. We were in that hotel room for 2 days straight. The rapper and the DJ would have groupies come to the suite, and when they were done, the hoochies would leave via the bedroom door. There were girls coming and going. We got high nonstop, snorting, cooking, and smoking. We only took a break when we ran out of baking soda. Andre and I ran to the store at 5 o'clock in the morning to get some. We were on some sort of coke binge. It was crazy. When we got back to DC, Andre and I were still hanging hard. One time, he made a delivery to my home and he brought about 5 people with him. I guess it was a party of sorts, which was very rare for me. He brought people who I had seen before and was cool with. I never entertained in my apartment because I lived in a so-called ghetto on Sherman Avenue, right near Howard University. I spent much of my time in my apartment. I wouldn't leave it, go to work, and come back to it. But I was okay with Andre showing up to my house for what turned out to be a coke party. We were all smoking and sniffing and having a merry old time, and everything was great until I passed out. This was the first time I had ever passed out, and when I came to, everybody was at the door with their coats on, like they needed to be out just in case I was dead or something. They would have left me there to die. That was a light bulb moment for me. Getting high with motherfuckers doesn't do anything for you except give people something to talk about or worse. Nobody's going to stick around if something goes down, and nobody's got your back. That's just that that's just that world. If somebody passed out in front of me, I would be out too. I never blamed the cipher. I just learned an internal lesson. Don't believe that people are going to be there for you if you're doing something illegal or just plain ill. Your boys who you think are holding it down with you on the block or your girls who you think have your back, the second they get caught up in some shit, don't think they either don't think that they either won't actually be out or turn your ass in if pressed by the authorities. That's a reality. I'm not just saying this because it happened to me. I watched it happen to Jason Williams, the former NBA All-Star. He has all of these people over his house, supposedly a bunch of his friends, and somehow a limo driver is found shot to death in Jason's bedroom. At first, no one knows what happened. Everybody says it was an accident and that the driver somehow shot himself. But when pressed, one by one, Jason's friends turned on him. And now he's facing a trial and many years in jail. What happened to that limo driver was tragic and no one deserves to die. I'm just making a point that people who you think are down for you and have your back, no matter, can turn on you on a dime. The law has a way of offering deals so sweet for people to turn against each other that eventually everybody folds like a cheap suit. Even Sammy the Bull Gravano folded. And that's the mob. So what could I possibly expect from some cokeheads I barely knew? Of course they would roll out. I would do the same. I don't know anybody who would have been there for me when I came to. There were there were they were just doing their thing. No hard feelings. But it began a period of real isolation and paranoia for me. No more coke parties at my place, that's for sure. Certainly, there would be no more sharing of my secret with people in the industry. At these little industry parties that I was going to, even though it seemed as though many people were doing cocaine, I also knew that I could never use my cocaine use as entree into the business. I knew I couldn't break into the business via doing coke, just like I somehow knew it wouldn't be cool for me to break in via fucking. Sure, I could have easily caught some DJ's eye or some big ballin' jock's eye and gotten down like that and ended up as his sidekick on a morning show. Or I could have been one of his coke buddies. But somehow I knew those two ways of breaking into the business would be a big no no.